The narratives that you are about to see are fictionalized scenarios. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, locales, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Use case number 3 narrative demonstrates a few things. 1. UVR request, creation, and distribution. 2. Coordination between UAS operations within a UVR. And 3. Flight modifications in response to a UVR, including in-flight intent changes. Now that the contingent aircraft has been detected and avoided, Officer Howard returns his attention to the search and rescue efforts. At 7:57 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Fire and Rescue Department receives an alert about a stranded vehicle at Plum Creek, with a family of 4 and their Cocker Spaniel Henry trapped inside. Officer Howard initiates the rescue mission by requesting a UAS volume reservation, or UVR, via the Eros USS. The purpose of the UVR is to notify operators in the area that something significant and essential is happening, in this case, a rescue operation, and they may need to adjust their operations to avoid interference. The FAA receives the UVR, and 5 Eros public safety drones access the area above Plum Creek to gather the information that will help them rescue Henry and the stranded family. The environmental and agricultural surveys, media activity, and one of the hobbyists will need to access their USSs to strategically deconflict or end their operations before the start of the public safety UVR. The only operator who doesn't get the message and adjust accordingly is the local television station, because its drone is not using a USS and therefore is unaware of the public safety UVR. The TV station's drone operator also fails to check for notifications and continues with the flight, getting dangerously close to the search and rescue operation at Plum Creek. Officer Howard uses a remote ID app to determine the location of the TV station pilot, who agrees to land, enabling the safe continuation of the rescue mission.
In this scenario, we wanted to take a look at how a qualified entity is able to disseminate something we call a UAS volume reservation. A UAS volume reservation is really about notifying the UAS operator about priority operations taking place in a particular type of airspace.
We're going to demonstrate both authorized and unauthorized access to the UVR and identify those that are unauthorized through a broadcast remote ID capability.
This use case also builds upon the previous 2 scenarios that have been conducted up until now. It includes both the high density environment as well as intent changes, in addition to the UAS volume reservation concept. In this scenario, an additional flight intent change can be created due to a UVR. If the UVR is put into place, or that volume is put into place where there is priority operation occurring, those that are already in flight need to change their intents or their flight plans in order to deconflict from that volume. We envision that authorized entities such as public safety entities can request UVRs. The policy and business rules are currently being developed in order to support the technology that is being demonstrated here today. Some of the scenarios that UVRs can potentially be used for are areas such as search and rescue, as demonstrated in this scenario. Some other scenarios that UVRs could be used for are firefighting operations, search and rescue, medevac operations, or generally alerting to potential manned operations in an area.
Certain USSs are being developed to support creation and initiation of UVRs, and of course the people using those softwares would always have the appropriate credentials. It's a requirement, though, that UVR, once created, be shared amongst all operations in that area and also to the FAA, so that all operators and the regulator can be aware of this restriction and support the proper use and implementation and response to the creation of that UVR.
those that have been qualified from the FAA to request a UVR, as well as the entity providing the UVR has also been qualified by the FAA to provide that particular service. The creation and distribution of a UVR or UAS volume reservation is another component of the data exchange that we're looking to enable from the industry side and notify the FAA on an as-needed basis. This provides a common and situational awareness picture for all those operating in that common area and provides the operators with an extra component of information in order to conduct their operation safely.
When I think about the UVR, I really see it as somewhat of a continuum. I think the appropriate approach here is to have several different layers that have different functionalities and meanings to those that are or aren't able to operate in them. This demonstration's in contrast to another potential type of UVR that would be purely informational for the pilots. It wouldn't necessarily preclude them from flying in the area, but just like NOTAMs for manned aviation today, it would be informational and purely provide an additional level of safety for the airspace.
We envision UVRs to be small in space and small in time constraints, so they don't necessarily have a direct tie-in to our traditional temporary flight restriction process. Within UVRs, we envision there's multitudes of actions that an operator could take. If the UVR were more of a restriction, operators are provided with a heightened sense of priority operations. They are notified. They have additional information to maintain clear separation from the priority operations taking place in a particular volume.
When we have an advisory UVR, it's really up to the judgment of the pilot as to whether or not they can conduct their mission without interfering with the intent and the purpose of that volume reservation, and in many cases maybe they can, but ultimately they're still responsible for safety of their own flight and safety of others in the airspace. The architects of the system recognize that completely restricting airspace all the time is not necessarily the best solution, or does not necessarily provide equitable access where it can be achieved safely. So there's many instances or examples in manned aviation today where pilots very adequately make these decisions to interact with advisory notices and maintain safety. It's a really nice additional layer to provide safety of the airspace.